AM560.com, on the AM560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM560. The Answer.
Top of the morning and happy 2023. Dan and Amy, we're back. Like MacArthur. Ben Cardin is a socialist senator from Maryland. He had this to say about the First Amendment, of course, talking in the context of tech and specifically angling his comments in the direction of Elon Musk. Ben Cardin, socialist senator from Maryland, his interpretation of the First Amendment, it's telling and chilling.
If you espouse hate, if you espouse violence, you're not protected under the First Amendment. So I think we can be more aggressive in the way that we handle that type of use of the internet. We know that Europe has done things. I think we have to learn from each other.
We need to adopt the European approach to free speech, which is to say you don't have an individual God-given right to freely express yourself. And that, of course, would implicate freedom of conscience as well, and that's not lost on Ben Cardin. By the way, hate speech is not protected by the First Amendment. In fact, it explicitly is.
Right.
It explicitly is. Perhaps he's familiar with the Nazis marching through Skokie. This was back at a time when the ACLU actually was interested in First Amendment protections, restraining the government from infringing on people's speech, however noxious, so long as it didn't cross over into conduct, like the incitement to violence. Yes, that's true. That is not protected. Speech you don't like but has no proximity to violence is absolutely protected. In point of fact, it's remarkable, but this is a commentary on our education system from pre-K through post-secondary. It's remarkable. The great jurists, particularly those who were seen by the left as great jurists in the annals of American history, for example, Louis Brandeis, the namesake of Brandeis University, who specifically commented on speech that you don't like, that the antidote to speech you don't like, I'm paraphrasing, is more speech, not enforced silence. Brandeis's words. Ben Cardin is either wildly ignorant or purposefully so, and I think it's probably more the latter. Because hate has no home here, say these Mercedes Marxists in the suburbs to whom Ben Cardin is catering, and the entire Democrat Socialist Party along with him. Oh, and by the way, speaking of Europe and a global approach to combating hate, in quotation marks, as the left defines it, which of course is synonymous with disagreement with the left, Klaus Schwab is making the rounds online again. We mentioned him a bit earlier in the program when we were talking about the fourth industrial revolution as part of the great reset that these global corporatists envision. And the trans they're talking about is not related to gender identity, but related to transhumanism, the fusion of the digital and the biological. Well, Klaus Schwab is making the rounds also with the video snippet of his announcement of the World Economic Forum's Global Education Initiative. Listen to this, right up Ben Cardin's alley.
We put emphasis on what I said before, public-private partnerships, which we accompany. So when we define a project like our Global Educational Initiative, I just describe it in a second. We have, under the leadership of Cisco and many other companies, practically all the big names, we try to revolutionize the educational system of Jordan, Egypt, and now Burundi, by working together with the local authorities. We work also together with UNESCO, not only to equip the schools, but to put to retrain the teachers, to put the new curricula into place. So we work together we accompany those we do not, such a difference to the Clinton initiative, which mainly, and which is a good thing, which asks companies to pledge some money, to make a commitment, and then to come back and to report. We are with the initiative from the beginning to the end. But there's one other difference.
Yeah, they're an enforcement arm, is essentially what Klaus Schwab is saying. And by the way, I liked Klaus Schwab better when he was Siegfried, the head of chaos in Get Smart. This guy, there's kind of a Bond villain. He strikes me as more of a cartoonish, quote-unquote, villain. I guess it would be cartoonish if there weren't so many WEF acolytes in positions of power in the first, second, and developing worlds. But that's what this an education initiative is about. You think you have central planning at CPS in Chicago? You ain't seen nothing yet if it's left up to these guys. For more on this and other matters, we're pleased to be joined by our friend John Hinderaker again. He is, of course, the contributor and publisher of powerlineblog.com, must-reading on a daily basis. John, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, great to be with you, Dan.
So, just this sort of bending big tech to its will. I mean, the left has to do that now just because of Musk's takeover of Twitter. Otherwise, they had big tech, as we know from the Twitter files, already bent to its will. And then you marry that with and this isn't like global conspiracy stuff. It's just Klaus Schwab and who his partners are, and he goes through them, and you see Bill Gates, and you see the biggest corporations in the world, and you see cabinet ministers and presidents of first world countries that are all bending to the will of the World Economic Forum's agenda too. And when you start talking, when they start talking about an education initiative, which necessarily means K through 12 at the local level, then our ears should be perking up.
Dan, the World Economic Forum is really sinister. You know, when I first started hearing about the Great Reset in conservative media, I thought, oh, was that some kind of right-wing conspiracy term? And I looked it up. No, it's not. The Great Reset, that is an initiative of the World Economic Forum. And what it really comes down to is rule of the world by the global elites. No more local control. No more pesky democracy like we have in the U.S. The Great Reset. And, you know, you talk about the World Economic Forum getting involved in education, and you're right, Dan, it's really scary. One of the basic things going on here in the United States, and in fact probably the only bright spot in November's election, is parents rising up to try to take over responsibility for their kids' education by running for local school boards, by voting for pro-parent candidates for local school boards. And this is a classic example of what the global elites that are represented by the World Economic Forum are trying to stamp out.
Well,
they don't want local control. They don't want parents making decisions.
It's sort of where we can use a favorite aphorism of the left against them. Think globally and act locally. Think about these global ghouls like Klaus Schwab and act locally at your school district, because Klaus Schwab and the teachers unions are aligned. When Klaus Schwab says by 2030 nobody will own property and everybody will be happy, now that's been scrubbed from the website. That's no different than the Chicago Teachers Union perspective on property possessed outside of their hands. I also note that the World Economic Forum has now scrubbed Twitter from its social media footprint and is promoting Chinese communist social media companies too. I mean, so you call it. You can say this is conspiratorial or not. And I know you're not saying it, but the left can say, "Oh, it's right-wing conspiracies or not." But this is just what they're doing, and you can attach whatever meaning to it or implication to it you'd like.
Well, we'd be a lot better off, Dan, if everybody went to the World Economic Forum website and read it. You know, this is not
like Black Lives Matter. Read it.
Yeah, this is their publicly proclaimed agenda.
Well, I want to get to a couple other topics with you as well, too. One, this sort of unnerving business of electoral politics, particularly within the House Republican ranks, and the prospect of a bit of a mess starting today with the fight over Kevin McCarthy's candidacy to be Speaker of the House. And apparently he's making concessions, but the concessions aren't enough for a handful of holdouts that could prevent him from winning the speakership and the House Republicans to getting on about their business with respect to the FBI and Hunter Biden and whatever else they can do. What's your handle on this? I mean, it seems to me, look, Andy Biggs and company, if you don't have the votes and you can't come up with somebody who could get the votes, then it's time to concede defeat and move on to more important things.
Dan, I mean, I think this is an instance of the proposition that if there's a way to screw something up, the Republicans will find it. You know, they've got this very slim House majority. As you say, they need to get going on the people's business. And the last thing that people want to see is, oh, yeah, let's have an intramural fight over who's going to be Speaker. When, as you say, the only one who's got the votes is Kevin McCarthy. And so the smart thing to do is elect McCarthy and start acting like a majority. Unfortunately, it's not clear that's what the Republicans are going to do.
And there's 9 who want rules changes, making it easier for them to remove the speaker. He's conceded to that, but, I mean, if not Kevin McCarthy, then who?
No, that's exactly right. They don't have a candidate, certainly not a candidate who can win. And so this is another example, I think, of Republicans shooting themselves needlessly in the foot.
Something else that you wrote about that has a particular resonance for us in Chicago is violent crime. We have an incident at least a day, horrific. We piled up more than 700 murders and more than 3,500 shootings last year again. And you wrote about an incident that happened at the Mall of America, a killing at the Mall of America over the holidays, too, and what it speaks to with respect to the criminal justice system in big metropolitan areas controlled by the left.
Yeah, that's right, Dan. I was shopping at the Nordstrom store at the Mall of America, biggest shopping mall in the United States, on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. And 3 hours after I was shopping in that store, a murder occurred in that very store. There was an altercation between 2 groups of youths, as they're described in the newspapers. I assume that means it was a gang conflict. From news accounts, it sounds like there were 3 guns fired, and one of the people involved in this altercation was shot 8 times, died on the scene. A middle-aged lady who was there with her teenage daughter was shopping right nearby. A bullet grazed her, put a hole in her jacket. But, of course, as the facts start to come out, Dan, you find the same thing that you always do, which is that even though these were young people, 17, 18, 19 years old, they were veterans of the criminal justice system already. And one of my colleagues at American Experiment, David Zimmer, took a deep dive into the court records as to one of these kids. And he turned 18, which is the only reason this is even available. And it turned out that he had been involved, apparently, in a violent carjacking where they put a gun to a woman's head, stole her car. A few days later, he's driving the car more than 90 miles an hour down the highway. A police officer gives chase. He flees the officer at a high speed. Other vehicles, police vehicles become involved. They deflate the tires. He keeps fleeing even though the tires are deflated. Crashes into a barrier, tries to switch out of the driver's seat with another guy in the car. And the upshot of all of this, there's no attempt to even investigate whether he was one of the violent carjackers, which he almost certainly was. Long story short, he winds up only being asked to pay restitution in the amount of the deductible on the insurance policy of the owner of the stolen car, i.e. $500, which he doesn't do. And then a couple of months after this, right, he's one of the guys involved in this murder at the Mall of America. And the point, Dan, we see this over and over again, is these young people learn a lesson through their repeated contacts with the criminal justice system. And that lesson is that in liberal states like Minnesota, where I live, or Illinois, where you live, crime is not taken seriously. They can commit crime after crime and just get away with it, and then sooner or later somebody winds up dead.
I just wonder your perspective, another Midwestern state that's got a long tradition in leftism, even a deeper tradition really than Illinois, but now is a Democrat stronghold because of Minneapolis-St. Paul, like we are because of Cook County, although now the suburbs too. But you had a governor's race this cycle, just like we did, and it was close for a while, and Tim Walz ended up winning by 7 points or something. And I wonder, what your perspective is on Minnesota, the suburban communities that put the Democrats over the top, and what, if any, positive takeaways there are from the election recently concluded in Minnesota.
Dan, I was confident that this was the year when really major issues like crime and the cost of living were going to focus the minds of these suburban swing voters. I thought the Republicans were going to have a great year nationally and a great year in Minnesota. Obviously, it didn't happen. And apparently what was going on is that a lot of these suburban voters cared more about abortion than about crime, cost of living, education, and so forth. That was a huge issue in Minnesota, as I think it was in some other states. And the other thing is, exit polling indicates that a lot of people were turning out, a lot of Democrat voters in what normally would have been expected to be a pretty low turnout election, but a lot of Democratic voters were turning out to vote against Donald Trump. I saw that at a couple of exit polls, which is bizarre. Of course, Donald Trump is not in office. He's not on the ballot. And yet, he was the one guy who agreed with the Democrats that the election was all about Donald Trump. And so what I would say, Dan, is that here in Minnesota, we kind of got swamped by these national trends, and frankly, it's pretty disheartening.
The thing about that, too, and this requires a deeper dive in Illinois, and certainly would be in Minnesota, too. I know I hear that what you just described a lot, and there's certainly merit to it, but there's something else, too. You're trying to crawl in the minds of people whose minds you don't want to spend much time in, so it's a bit challenging, but everybody I voted for is in charge. And I just can't bring myself to say we need a course correction. I've gotten everything I want. That's the voter, the leftist voter in Illinois. That's the leftist voter in Minnesota. So one way of deluding myself into thinking that I'm the problem and my choices are the problem is to say, I still have this boogeyman, Donald Trump, and I'm just going to come to vote. I'm not going to vote for the failures of my people. I'm going to vote against the boogeyman that they've created that provides a comfortable outlet for me. I wonder how much of that's happening.
Well, I think a lot, Dan. I mean, things have gone so badly in the Biden administration, and frankly, badly in Minnesota under now 12 years of Democratic governors and mostly Democrat legislature. Things have gone very, very badly. And so these left-leaning voters have to conjure up these boogeymen, right? And this is what the Democrats keep talking about, threats to our democracy and fascism and all this complete nonsense. I really didn't think that was going to work. But apparently that kind of thing is effective in distracting voters from the failures that they should be seeing with their own eyes.
Right. I don't have to hold myself to account because the wolf is at the door. I mean, I think there's something to that, but it's got to be quantified, and that's a bigger undertaking. He is John Hinderaker, president of the Center of the American Experiment, contributor to Powerline, powerlineblog.com. John, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you. Have a great day.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
A great smile can make you feel happy and confident. So when you consciously conserve your teeth, that glowing smile will show through. At Best Dental Group, Doctors Economos, Gevalis, and their staff are ready to help you create that perfect look or maintain the one you have now. Along with general dentistry, Best Dental Group is a multidisciplined practice with an orthodontist, periodontist, and prosthetic specialists on site. They use the newest breakthroughs in dental technology, such as titanium implants, Invisalign clear braces, and laser treatments. Don't let fear get in the way. They can recommend sedation to make your experience as comfortable as possible. Best Dental Group is located in historic downtown Bartlett and is a multilingual office. Call 630-830-4930. That's 630-830-4930. Or visit bestdental.org. Best Dental Group, sharing your conservative values and helping you to conserve your teeth.
All right, make 2023 a year for yourself and for better health. And how can you do that? Well, get enough exercise, get